Christopher McGee for Health and Fitness The Truth, and in this video I want to talk about one of the most important aspects when it comes to self-defense, and that is listening to your intuition, understanding what your intuition actually is and how your intuition is trying to talk to you. So when I am teaching self-defense, and especially when I'm teaching self-defense to women, I make this book an integral part of what I'm teaching. So it's called The Gift of Fear. Honestly, The Gift of Intuition would probably be a more on-point title, but it is called The Gift of Fear. Gavin de Becker is the author, and the book is really about listening to your intuition, and there's this whole book that does a fantastic job of answering the issues that I said this video was about. Gavin de Becker, if you don't know that name, I'd encourage you to look it up, and I'd encourage you to get this book and read it. We're gonna go over a couple of the things in this book in this short video that won't do the book justice at all. We'll go over one story from this book, and there are dozens of stories like it that will really drive home the points that I'm talking about here. Gavin de Becker is kind of the Michael Jordan of the understanding violent behavior field. He has a private firm that offers security and security details and security systems to many of the highest profile individuals in the world, including US senators, a lot of people in Hollywood, so on and so forth. Anyway, Gavin de Becker is the man in this field. So to illustrate to you what your intuition is and how it works, I'm gonna just tell you a quick story from the book, The Gift of Fear. It's just one of many stories like it in here, and I'm gonna read a little bit out of the book about that story. So to sum up the story, here's something that happens. This guy named Robert Thompson, who's a client of Gavin de Becker's. Robert walks into a convenience store one day, inexplicably gets terrified, and turns around and walks right back out. And moments later, a cop walks in and gets a shotgun blast because he interrupted the robbery that was happening right after Robert walked out of the convenience store. So Robert is flabbergasted that he narrowly escaped a really violent situation. He could have died too. Robert is talking to Gavin de Becker later, and Gavin uses this conversation in the book to make a point. And Robert's talking to him and he's like, man, I don't even know what it was that I saw or felt, but I just had this gut feeling. I was scared and I turned around and walked right out. And Gavin de Becker asked him, well, what did you see when you walked in? And he's like, well, I saw, you know what, here, I'm just gonna start reading right out of the book. Robert says, nothing, it was just a gut feeling. And then he pauses, and then he says, well, now that I think back, the guy behind the counter looked at me with a very rapid glance, just jerked his head toward me for an instant, and I guess I'm used to the clerk sizing you up when you walk in, but he was intently looking at another customer, and that must have seemed odd to me. I must have seen that he was concerned. And then he says, I noticed that the clerk was focused on a customer who was wearing a big heavy jacket, and of course I now realized it was a very hot day, so that's probably where this guy was hiding the shotgun. Only after I saw on the news what kind of car they were looking for did I remember that there were two men sitting in a station wagon in the parking lot with the engine running. Now it's all clear, but it didn't mean a thing to me at the time. And Gavin responds, actually it did then too. And what Gavin is getting at is that Robert's subconscious pulled in all of that information and stored it. Robert's subconscious also had stored in it the information that Robert had seen on the news, that convenience store had been robbed several times in the past, all of the stored information that Robert had ever experienced about what violence looks like when it's imminent, okay? All of that sent red flags to Robert's subconscious, even though he was not consciously aware of any of it. And that's an important distinction. When we're talking about our intuition, we're not talking about what rationally makes sense. We're not talking about slowly looking around and taking in all the information and step by step consciously analyzing what might be dangerous. When we're talking about your intuition, we're talking about really just that gut feeling. But because it's that gut feeling or intuition, those are words, especially in Western cultures, that we tend to kind of brush away as not as valuable sources of information because we can't explain them. But the fact that your subconscious picked up on all that information means that it's all valid information. You're just not consciously aware of it as much. Let me read a little bit more of what Gavin de Becker has to say about this. What Robert and many others want to dismiss as a coincidence or a gut feeling is in fact a cognitive process, faster than we recognize and far different from the familiar step-by-step thinking we rely on so willingly. We think conscious thought is somehow better when in fact, intuition is soaring flight when compared to the plodding of logic. Nature's greatest accomplishment, the human brain, is never more efficient or invested than when its host is at risk. Then, intuition is catapulted to another level entirely, a height at which it can accurately be called graceful, even miraculous. Intuition is the journey from A to Z without stopping at any other letter along the way. It is knowing without knowing why. That is, in a nutshell, how Gavin de Becker describes what your intuition is and how it works, and why it's so easy for us to rationalize those feelings away, even when those red flags are most important for us to listen to. Now that we've gone over what your intuition is, I just want to go over how it talks to you, okay? So at the top of this list, the least emergent kind of intuition feeling is just nagging feelings. You start dating a guy and you've just got this nagging feeling there's something not quite right about him, but you can't put your finger on it. There's nothing rational about that feeling, right? It's just this, it won't go away. Persistent thoughts, probably real similar to nagging feelings, but some of us, you know, it's a feeling, and some of us, it occurs in our head, a little different flavor for the same idea, I think. Humor. And this one's interesting because, did I spell humor right? Totally. You wouldn't think of as your intuitive sense of I might be in danger. We try to make light of something in order to release the pressure of it on our minds, okay? And so your intuition could be talking to you, giving you a red flag, and you release the tension of that by humor. Another one is wondering. We've got anxiety, curiosity, hunches. Just got a hunch. We got gut feelings. It's getting a little more visceral. Doubt, hesitation, suspicion, apprehension, and the last one, of course, fear. And to be clear, when Gavin de Becker is talking about fear as an intuitive red flag, he's not talking about something caught you off guard. That's not the fear he's talking about. He's talking about an animalistic fear that either paralyzes you or moves you to do something, and it will tell you which to do, right? We talk about fight or flight, and sometimes we talk about it in terms of if you freeze, you're gonna be in bad shape. You've gotta move. And sometimes we talk about it in terms of you need to hold still, you need to freeze, right? Gavin de Becker would say you need to listen to whatever that intuition tells you to do. And if it tells you to freeze, you go ahead and freeze. Here's the thing with intuition. It's possible that your intuition is badly informed. If you've been watching the late night news and there's a mass shooting, the reporters go and talk to the neighbors of the person who was the aggressor, the shooter. It's always the same. They say, he seemed like such a nice guy. He seemed like, you know, he kept to himself. He was always courteous. And what Gavin Becker says is, I'm so tired of hearing that. He says, what those news reports really should say is, neighbors knew nothing relevant to the situation, because everybody can be nice and everybody can keep to themselves, and those are not reliable indicators for whether or not someone is going to be violently inclined. And if you're watching the news late at night, you get this steady diet of people who are keeping to themselves and are quiet and are courteous otherwise. Well, something's creepy about them. If you get that steady information fed to you, your intuition could be poorly informed about what makes a violently inclined individual, okay? So it's possible that your intuition is poorly informed, but listen to it anyway. And then learn from the experience of having listened to it. If you listen to your intuition is talking because it sees something that you consciously don't, and it is acting in your best interest, whether it's rightly informed or not. So to recap, Gavin de Becker has written a lot of awesome books about how to recognize violent behavior and how to listen to and properly inform your sense of intuition. and I highly recommend, I cannot speak highly enough of Gavin de Becker and any books he's written on this subject. Your intuition is something that you ought to listen to, especially in the case of self-defense. Your intuition is not just a mythical, ephemeral, easily explained away thing. It is actually a scientific process of your subconscious picking up on information that you're not consciously aware of and sending you those red flags. And those red flags show up in a myriad of different ways. All right, thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. The next video in this segment, the next video about self-defense, we're still going over the kind of the psychology of self-defense before we get into actual striking and grappling stuff. The next one we go over, we're gonna start talking about how violent aggressors try to manipulate their victims before getting violent with them, okay? We're gonna talk about what that behavior looks like. We're gonna give you names and we're gonna give you specific examples of what that looks like. The next video is gonna be called forced teaming, one of those tools of manipulation, okay? Thanks for watching, guys.